What's up, guys? Leland here with Bomb Table Tyrants, and we got Tim back in the studio, and we wanted to talk to you about sounding boards, how important it is to have people in your life that you can talk to about when you're building an adventure, when you're creating content, when you are making a thing, to have a person or persons that you can bounce ideas off to see if you're going the right direction, to see if they sound legitimate and normal and not crazy. The main people that I have for me is my GMs, like Tim, Noble, Jesse, all the guys that are tyrants. And then, of course, my wife, who is a player with us, but not every time. And I like to have a person that isn't going to play in the game that I'm usually... If I'm creating a game, I like to ask a person that's not in the game to see their opinion and also not spoil it for someone who's going to be in the game. So if Tim is going to be playing in it, I'm usually not going to ask him too many questions, except for ones that aren't going to tip him off of like what's going to happen during the adventure. If I have just kind of broad general questions, I'll definitely send him a text, pick his brain about something. But if it starts to get into the what type of the main bad guy is going to be, things like that I want to be a surprise for him, then you need to have that person, that sounding board, who isn't involved in the game. So I guess where I'm going with this is that this doesn't always have to be a tabletop RPG person. This could be just someone in your life that you respect their opinion, and they could tell you you're off base with this and you'd listen to them. That's probably the main weird part of this, is it has to be someone that you're going to listen to. And if they give you advice that's counter to what you want to hear, that you'll take it and make adjustments and have a better product for it. So, Tim, just going off of that, just what's your intro kind of thoughts on sounding boards?
Obviously, the moral of the story is have a whole lot of friends. No, it's nice to have a bunch of GMs that you can talk to and you can bounce ideas off of. I bounce ideas off of Jesse all the time. I bounce ideas off of you. But I think I even texted you guys earlier this week about a very experimental, weird game that I'm coming up with that I want you to play in, because I don't know that most people are going to want to play in it. But it'll be interesting. It'll be fun. So I can't tell you about what that game is.
Yes.
I also talk to my wife all the time about the games that I'm putting together. She has played in the past, but she prefers to either sit and watch or hear about it after the fact. She just likes to hear about the experience and the story. And so I love to bounce ideas off of her. And she has very similar movie and book tastes to what I have. So I know that I'm going to get a respected opinion there. I think it's also important that you trust in yourself while you're listening to the other person. Because they might say, I think that sounds dumb. And what they're not saying is your idea is bad. It is, hey, that's not coming across the way that you think it's coming across. How do you rephrase it? How do you rework it? How do you readjust your approach angle so that it makes more sense and it's more enjoyable for your party?
Yeah, definitely. And I guess you kind of hit on it here. Just literally talking it out to explaining it to someone can really help you with building your adventure. While I'm describing this to my wife, sometimes before she even kind of puts a finger in up and says, hey, wait a minute, that didn't make sense, I'll catch myself and realize, oh, this way to get to this bad guy doesn't make any sense. So let me rewrite that real quick. Okay, so here's how we would get there. So just going through the story itself with someone can help you make changes to it that you didn't really see until you had to explain it to someone else.
Sometimes they'll also bring up other works of fiction that you weren't thinking of that are, oh, that reminds me of that movie. And then you start thinking of it from the perspective of that movie that they brought up. And then you can take things, add things, remove things, change it around as you see fit.
Definitely. The second part of describing it is that you want to be concise. I had a friend, and we sat down at a bar one time, and he was going to explain the grand intro to a game he was going to start. And as he went into it, my eyes just kind of glazed over after about minute 7 of the grand intro. And I was just like, listen, man, you're giving me the Cliff Notes version, and I'm already tuned out. Your players are going to be tuned out too. So that was my first piece of input to him, is if you're giving me the Cliff Notes version and I'm already checking out halfway into it, you need to be more concise. You need to cut this down way more. Just you reading a monologue about a wizard, is going to be no fun for your players minute 17, 20, 45, as they're kind of like, okay, man, can we play now? So just learn to self-edit as you're going in, and also be able to stand up and tell your friend, hey, that seems a little long and wordy, so maybe you cut it down just a little bit, as just like one of the first things as you're going into how you can have your sounding board help you. While you're describing your adventure, watch where they tune out, like I was just talking about, and also watch where they perk up. Like you were saying, like they're like, oh, that reminds me of that movie. That means that piqued their interest when they were hearing that part, and it's going to, that's a good part that you want to focus in on. So cut the parts that they kind of lose interest in, and add to those parts where they gain interest, because that's your meat and potatoes. That's where you're really going to have a great adventure, when that it sounds interesting just explaining it to someone.
I've also had luck if you've already had a few sessions with the group and you're maybe soundboarding something that's happening later in the campaign, throw out some things that your player characters have done that they have been interacting with, kind of their personalities, and maybe even throw in some examples of what you think they might do. Because that sounding board person might hear something that you would never have thought of. It can help you prepare for the way that some of your players might act in the future. You can even ask them what they would do in a certain situation and see if they would react the way that you're expecting your players to react.
Yes, yeah, I like that a lot. The reaction of like, what would you want to do next if this happened? See what they think. And most of the time, as we know with players, they're going to have that third or fourth or fifth option that you didn't even think of. And you're like, oh yeah, I didn't even think about that. Yes, they probably will do that. Now, in the next situation where you put your actual players into it, they'll find a seventh, eighth, ninth option that you also didn't think of. But at least you've kind of, I guess, every direction you can go will help you be able to have that web of controlling the player characters and making sure that you keep them inside the story and they don't go off the rails. Pieces that you want to go over with your sounding board is the hook. Does it sound viable that your player characters would want to even have, take part in this adventure? The problem, does the problem sound dire enough that they would care, which kind of goes back to the hook. Hook and the problem to me are very similar, but not the same thing. The problem is, here's what the problem is. Mr. Jones is missing. Do the characters even care? They need to have a reason why they care that he's missing. So the problem is different than the hook, in that the hook is why do they care, but they're also they need to be very compatible with each other. And if it doesn't make sense, then then you need to work on that and you may need to like tailor it for every character that you have playing potentially, as to why this is important to them, other than they're going because their teammates are going, and stuff like that. So, because you can always kind of drag those last few players that you can't fit in, of like why the rogue should help the knights of the Grand Templar, who would rather arrest him than be his buddy. But sometimes it's just like, well, my pals care, so I'm gonna go along with it. But at the same time, you want to try and rope in as much of the characters as you can and get your players involved.
If you can tie your campaign or your few sessions into your players' backstories, that's fantastic. That's wonderful. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is treasure in front, danger behind. Mm-hmm. Treasure in front, danger behind means that they have something that they're trying to get to. It doesn't have to be treasure, but maybe a story beat, maybe a new interesting clue to the mystery. Danger behind stops them from lollygagging, stops them from being in one place for too long or going off the beaten path and exploring somewhere that you don't need them to explore.
Yes.
And it doesn't always have to be life-threatening danger or world-ending danger, but it has to be something that is going to catch up with them.
Yep. I guess, and I've said this in multiple videos, I'm sure, if my players start to wander off and go on a shopping trip or something like that, the enemy of the day will show up. The goblins arrive and start, ransack the armory that they were in as they were trying to buy armor instead of focusing on the adventure or something like that. So you have ways to jump in and, I wouldn't call those twists really, but just those interjects, the ability to kind of throw in a combat, throw in an NPC that shows up to engage them, to be able to get them back on track and guide them towards the way that you want to go with your adventure. Next piece that I like and that I run into is I'll work on an adventure, sometimes for months. And the reason why it takes months instead of days, because the actual writing will just take a few days, but I'll get stuck on why. What's this next thing? What does the big boss want? I'll get stuck on a piece that I want to make sense, and I'll just have to like ruminate on it for weeks sometimes. So talking to my wife, talking to these guys really helps me usually see it from a totally different perspective that I wasn't even thinking about. When we ran Spire, I couldn't think of a reason why this eclipse was supposed to happen. And I don't even think it, I actually kind of think I went and didn't even use it that way. But eclipse was supposed to happen, but he was supposed to stay eclipsed, if that makes sense. And I was like, why would it do that? That's like literally not how planets work. I don't want to make it just because magic. I didn't want to make it just, but as like some miracle or something. So I talked to one of the players who ended up playing in that game, and which is why I didn't use his answer. But he was like, maybe there's a planet that they didn't know about that is also in a tertiary orbit, and it also is, once the regular planet moves out of the way, this planet that they didn't know about, a moon or something, is also there, continuing the eclipse. Or a massive alien ship, which in this game would weirdly make sense, of like a massive alien ship during the eclipse moved into place and is now blacking out the sun. And I was like, both of those work, neither of which I thought about, and both are viable and better ideas than what I had, because I was just like, I don't know, why would this eclipse continue to go on after it was only supposed to last 5 minutes? Why would it last all night? So things like that, of like just having different points of view from people, that they'll have a fresh idea that you didn't think of, even though you've been trying to think of it. That's what you've been spending your time on for the last 2 days. And all of a sudden there's like, well, why not this? And you're like, how did I not think of that?
You are constructing a entire machine that's got thousands of cogs and gears and pulleys and levers and things like that. And you're trying to figure out how this one cog is supposed to make the rest of the machine work.
Yep.
And when you ask your soundboard about it, they don't care about the rest of the machine. They just care about that one cog, so they can look at it, evaluate it, assess it, and throw out some ideas of what it does and help you see that bigger picture.
Yep. And a sounding board may not find problems, but similar to being able to go directions that players may go, they may ask questions about things of like, well, why? Why was there an eclipse? Why was this? They may ask questions that a player may ask you, and if you've already, thought it through and answered someone before then, now you can do it much quicker than you would have earlier, because you've gone over it before. Someone's asked you that question before. Someone has kind of asked why this happens, because you may not be thinking of the why, because you see the whole picture. It's a lot easier to understand why when you know the whole adventure and know exactly why everything is happening. They do not. They're getting small pieces of information slowly throughout the adventure. So they will, like, their whole job is to ask questions. So having that person ask you questions can be great, to let you prepare for just the general type of questions you may have to field from the pesky adventurers.
It also helps you just get the imagination that's in your mind out into the world. If you are writing a story or putting together an adventure, a campaign, all of it exists in your mind, and you can see all the pieces and you can put everything together. And when you write your notes, it's all connected because it's all coming from you.
Yep.
But once you start trying to explain that to someone else, to tell that person that story, now you have to do it in a way that is structured so that they can follow along and progress and make sense of it. And just getting it out into the world to say it to someone else helps your mind structure that, so that when you sit down at the table, you kind of have an idea of where you want to start and where you want to go.
Yeah, it's going to keep you familiar with your adventure, especially when you're preparing it. The closer you are to actually running it, the better it is for that, to be able to have it easily downloadable from the back of your brain into the front, so you can talk about it. Some of the things that I've had that really helped me, that my wife has pointed out, is things like, do all of my player NPCs make sense? And one of the weird things that she pointed out once is, she was like, every single one of your NPCs has a name with a T, so I don't know who's who. It was like Terran and Timor and Tuldrin, and I was just like, I didn't even realize that. Holy crap. So I went back. I didn't have too many, but I just had like 4, and they all had T names. And she was like, you keep saying a guy with a T. And I was like, yeah, Timor. How's that so confusing? Mm-hmm. Well, she's like, because they all have a T name. And I was like, that's not, oh, that's totally true. And so being able to see that, just that weird little piece of like, they all sounded, they had a name that sounded the same, totally confused her on who was who of these four different NPCs. So I went back, gave, each one of them a different letter name, a different sounding name, so that they were way more distinguishable by reference that way, so that you didn't have all the T name characters that just, you're like, I don't know, one of the T guys was talking to me and said something. So that was a great thing that she was able to point out, because I asked her about, do my NPCs make sense? I always am very important to me. It's always very important to me to have a good balance between social interactions and combat, because I don't want to ramp up the tension continuously, where combat goes into a bigger combat, goes into a bigger combat, goes into a bigger combat, and then it's over. Great job. It's like, I love to kind of have the ups and downs of combat, and then a social interaction, and then a combat, and then a social interaction, and kind of just keep that pace popping up and down until you really ramp it up at the very end with a big combat at the end, or a big social interaction where it's tense. So that's another important thing that can be hard if the person doesn't really know tabletop RPG games, how that works. They may have trouble with that, but another GM could definitely say, yeah, you have like 4 combats in there in like 2 sessions. You may not get through all of that in the time for that. So you may want to like kind of change that up and do a combat and then a social and then a combat and then a social, instead of 4 combats, all 4 one after another. Because that's going to be like 7 hours of combat potentially, or something like that. All my combats go very quickly, but at the same time, I don't want to have them just bogged down in combat, because not all players want to do combat all the time. So it's important to have that balance.
If you bring up your story, your idea, your campaign to your sounding board persons, most specifically the kinds of people who don't play tabletop games, who are outside of that culture, and they say, oh, that sounds just like, and then they insert a piece of fiction, a movie or a TV show, don't ever take offense to that.
No.
Sometimes you can feel like, oh, I don't like that piece of fiction. I don't want my work to be compared to that.
Yep.
That's not what they're doing. They're recognizing something, hopefully something that they like, because that's why they recognized it. It is a compliment. It is how our brains work as humans. We like to find order and structure and repeating patterns. So if they do see something, lean into that. It's the same thing as saying yes to your players when they want to do something really awesome and stupid. That's what the whole point of this hobby is doing those awesome, stupid things.
Yeah.
So if someone really likes your idea and thinks that it is like something else that they like, maybe lean into that. Find some cool stuff from that thing that they like and sprinkle more of it into your game.
Yeah. And I guess I take from modern media all the time. When I did Age of Sigmar Soulbound, I took Stargate and literally just transposed Stargate into an adventure using all of the Age of Sigmar characters. And there was one player that came to me after and was like, this is kind of like Stargate. And I was like, yes, you got it. So it gave me like so much joy that they recognized that it was kind of like, oh, when we went through the Realm Gate and then blew it up at the end, it was kind of like what they did in Stargate. And I was like, exactly. That's exactly what I literally stole that whole movie and plagiarized it, and you guys just played through it in your own way. And so it wasn't obviously, there wasn't exactly the same interactions, but it was very similar in all the ways, in that they went to a different realm. There was people there that didn't speak their language. They had to like kind of interact with the locals, and then of course, oh crap, there's this vampire overlord instead of this Egyptian alien overlord that wants to destroy us. Oh, well, so we got to get back through and blow the gate before we, close everything off. So, yeah, that's great. A great way. I know. I always think of Jesse. Jesse did the turtle from Neverending Story as a character one time, and he was, same thing. Whenever we were like, "This is like the turtle from the Neverending Story," his like eyes lit up. He was like, "Exactly." So you could, it gave him joy for us to recognize the character that we were running into. That was from another tale, but to be able to replicate that and do a good enough job that people recognize it in your art is super important. So awesome job, Tim. I really appreciate it. I guess some admin notes here. We are going to Chicago for Adepticon again this year, and I guess next year, 2024. I'll have this posted before the end of the year, I hope. And that's going to be March 20th through 4th, and we're doing all kinds of RPG games. A lot of the tyrants are coming with me. He's gonna have a new child, so it's he will be home, but at the same time, we will try and get him next year. But we're slowly expanding. Last year I ran, I think, 5 games. Now we're running 10 games, so we have doubled the size of the Bottom Table Tyrants presence at Adepticon. We're going to have 2 more tyrants with us. We'll have Noble and Joseph, and they'll be running games. We're running Mech Warrior, the Battletech RPG. We're running Wrath and Glory, the 40k RPG. We're running Age of Sigmar, Soulbound. All of these are all new adventures also. So if you played last year and you're watching this, you can come again and play. It's an all new adventure. You won't run into anything you've already seen. And to be honest, the way I run things so haphazardly, you probably wouldn't even notice if I ran the exactly same one. We're doing Morkborg. That's going to be a new one that we're really excited about. Vampire the Masquerade V5. I'll be running that in the evening. I'm excited about that one. I got a lot of people that asked me for that one when we did that last year. And then Eat the Reich, which is also vampires. It's another new game from Rowan, Rook, and Deckard, which are my new favorite RPG makers. They made Spire, so the same writer of Spire and Heart also wrote this, and it is amazing. So I really want you guys to check that out. We'll be doing episodes on Spire and Heart and this as well, and Eat the Reich as well, because all of these are really great systems. I highly recommend these to you guys, so please check them out and come join us at Adepticon. The registration fills up really fast, so you want to jump on there, sign up. There will only be about 5 seats per table at all of these, even though we're running 10 events over 4 days. It's going to go really fast on how quick the sign up goes. So if you come, always come and check. I think we always had at least 1 or 2 chairs empty at most of the games, and players would filter in and say, hey, is there an empty chair? Can I jump in? And so we always had a full table, but it wasn't always the people who signed up. Come see us. We'd love to meet all you guys. We appreciate it. We'll see you soon. Leland and Tim out.